have to put this back up here. Okay, so welcome everybody. Today we are going to go to Messina. We're going to talk about an artist called Antonello da Messina. Messina is in Sicily, right on the Strait of Messina. So you can see that here on the map. And here's the Strait of Messina right here, and I'll show you what that looks like from kind of close up. That's that spot right where the mainland of Italy almost touches Sicily. So we're going to talk about this artist called Antonello. He was born in Messina. He's kind of a mystery figure. He seems to have traveled a lot. We know a little bit about his travels. He was definitely in Naples and in Venice, which you can see there on the map. And then also highlighted on the map is Poppiano, just to the southwest of Florence, which is where I live. So I'm coming to you from the castle of Poppiano. That door there on the right is the door to my kitchen where I'm standing right now. So I'm coming to you from there. And again, we're going to go to Messina, which is way down here in eastern Sicily, right there on the Strait of Messina. So this is what the strait looks like from space, literally. The Romans called it the Fretum Siculum. And there's this sort of really narrow channel. And Messina is right there in the middle of it. This is Messina with this wonderful natural port. So you can see why the ancient Greeks were all over that, right? They settled the city first to take advantage of that natural port. So this is what it looks like from space. And then there on the right, literally just standing on the beach, taking a picture of Calabria across the way. So at the closest point, it's just under 2 miles wide. So that's the space between Sicily over here and Calabria over here. And this is also the location of the mystical Fata Morgana and the evil sea serpents, creatures, Scylla and Charybdis. So this is Scylla, which you see here on the right, and here's Charybdis, which you see here on the left, which is at the location of Punto Faro. And then here's the city of Messina with that great natural port. So here's what it looks like. And you'll actually see this in some of the paintings that we're about to look at. So Messina, as I said, was actually settled by the Greeks, and it had a very active port for literally millennia. And a lot of what was going out of there was wine. You can see that here. This is a picture of the port of Messina from the late 1800s with wine barrels literally ready to navigate. There was a unfortunate, very devastating earthquake in 1908, 28th of December, 1908, 7.1 on the Richter scale, and 90% of the city of Messina was lost, as was a good percentage of the city of Reggio Calabria on the other side of the strait. Between 50 and 100,000 people were killed in this earthquake. It was really, really, really devastating. So the city, of course, built back, and today it looks a lot like this. You can see the town hall on the left. That seaside lungomare is what you see there on the right. So it looks quite different than it used to back in the day. They also tried to rebuild as many as they could of their old kind of important structures. Here you can see some really old churches, Norman constructions. Their Duomo dates to the 500s AD from the Justinian era. This is the reconstructed version. They've tried to use pieces of it. So Messina today looks a lot different than the way it did when Antonello was there. Antonello da Messina was born in Messina around 1425, when it was, again, this very important port, but you can see it was much smaller of a city. You can see it there within its defensive walls. So he was born there in about 1425. We really don't know much about him. He was a hugely important and hugely influential painter, but there are a lot of gaps in the records. There's just not a whole lot of paper trail on him, partly because in the destruction of that earthquake that we saw the photos of, other earthquakes and bombardments, Messina got it in World War II, for example, the documents just no longer exist. And then also because he tended to work a lot for private clients. And when you work for private clients, there's not a big paper trail of documents. If you have a public commission, there's a paper trail of notary documents from the first meeting for the commission, the first payment, when the thing was done, if there was any sort of issue, whether or not people approve things or don't approve things. So when you do a public commission, there's lots of chance to find bits and pieces of information about an artist in the documentary evidence. With Antonello, we really don't have any. We have very little. We do know that he was born in Messina. We're not sure exactly when, probably around 1425. His father was a marble cutter. His grandfather actually owned a ship called a Brigantina. It was a 2-masted ship, which looks like one of these kind of things. And the family owned some property, at least a home that was passed down through the generations. Otherwise, we really don't know that much about them. So they're kind of here in Messina on the periphery of Europe, but because there's this port, there's actually, they're actually very well connected with the rest of the world. And part of that connection happens on the fact that Messina is included in a Venetian trade route called the Muda di Fiandra. So from the 1300s to well into the 1500s, the Republic of Venice, which if you recall is a mighty maritime empire, they control most of the Eastern Mediterranean, and they clearly have this trade route that goes over west and takes items from the east, sort of spices from the Orient, swoops through the Straits of Messina, stops in Messina, loads up on things like linen, silk, wine, and off it goes to London and Bruges. So the point was to go to Flanders, the Netherlands, to the port here at Bruges. That happened twice a year, and then things came back as well, right? So the Netherlands in the 15th and 16th century was literally the political and economic center of Northern Europe. This is the location of the Dukes of Burgundy. And things that were coming out of there that were coming back to Venice are things like luxury goods, crafts, paintings, artists. People were moving back and forth. So while Messina is sort of on the edge of Europe, they're actually right here in one of the main stops on this kind of trade route that goes from Venice to Bruges and back. So there are trips, galleys going back and forth from Venice quite regularly. So again, there's works of art that are coming out of Bruges. And there are a lot of them because the current kind of popular style is Netherlandish painting. And one of the main proponents of that is Jan van Eyck. So he has a workshop in Bruges. He is selling to European merchants and diplomats who are present in Bruges. There are Italian bankers who are present in Bruges, purchase works of art from Jan van Eyck and his contemporaries and bring them back. People make commissions, they're sent back. Jan van Eyck was actually present in Italy. So this is kind of a big guy. He's very well known. And he's one of the leading proponents of Netherlandish art. And he is the guy who really perfected the use of oil paints in the very early 1400s. And he's part of this tradition of Netherlandish painting where they pay a lot of attention to very, very minute detail. And they construct this sort of convincing version, this illusion of reality. They're really able to mimic reality with this attention to detail, and also because they painted using oil paints. So in Tuscany, for example, they're not using oil paints right now. They're using tempera. And tempera is pigment that's mixed into some sort of binder, in this case, egg tempera. It's very fast drying. A painter has to be very quick, has to use short little strokes. The colors tend to draw into sort of these lighter chalky colors and produce a relatively flat image. All painters were very good at sort of depicting depth, but the kind of depth that somebody like Jan van Eyck was getting with oil paints really isn't possible with tempera. So what oil paint has going for it is that the pigment is suspended in an oil, which is very easily spread, right? And it's translucent. So the idea is that you layer strata, or just layers of colors of paint, one on top of the other, and light reflects down through them and bounces back out. So here, for example, you can see this green pigment. There's the ground, which is kind of a gray type of a ground. There's a layer of very light green. This is this cross section of a paint chip magnified a gazillion times. So there's this layer of a very light green that's lead white with just literally malachite that's gone through a mortar and pestle, mixed together with some oil. And then on top of that, another layer of green. So in order to create a certain type of green, the artist doesn't just mix the color to get the color he wants. He actually makes layers and layers and layers. So the light bouncing through there then looks to your eye like a whole different color. You can see the middle slide here is literally taken from a small loss in the cloak of the man who's depicted here in this double portrait. And you can see it's kind of a plum color. There's sort of a dusky red layer on top of the ground. These paintings were built up from sort of a gesso ground that then had sort of varnish on it to make it almost sort of off-white or gray. And there was maybe some underdrawing, something to give the artist something to go on as he started laying down layers of paint. Then they would just work. Usually they applied first the lighter highlight areas and then built up layers and layers of color to produce midtones and then the shadowy tones. So you get this just real, just very sort of deep sort of space, and they could really work with light, so it's very luminous. So you can see here how the purple, the plum color of the cloak was built up with this layer here of red with a little bit of blue in it, and then this pure ultramarine layer on top. So when the light bounces through here and back out, it actually looks kind of plum color to our eyes. And then mixed together with that was, in this case, particularly in that red layer, they have found flecks of ground up glass. Lots of other types of additives were used. It could have been used to give some opalescence to the color. It could have been used to make the oil kind of spread more easily with a brush, or even to help it dry quicker. And in this case, I think that's probably what was going on, because this red color that was used here for the underlayer of the cloak takes forever to dry. So they mixed in some little, literally just kind of shards of glass in there. So what we're looking at here is this portrait that Jan van Eyck did for Mr. Arnolfini. Arnolfini is not a Flemish name, that's a Tuscan name. He was a Tuscan banker. He was present in Bruges, and he asked Jan van Eyck to please paint his portrait, which he did. And in using oils, look at the way that Jan van Eyck was able to represent light, that kind of soft light that comes in and hits Mr. Arnolfini on one side of his face and then illuminates the face of his wife. Look at the range of textures that the artist was able to get here. They're both of the figures have on a little bit of fur. There's velvet. There are highlights kind of bouncing off of metallic surfaces. Look at the reflection in the mirror in the back. And then there's just great attention to detail, from the wooden carving of the bedstead to even what's being reflected here in the mirror. And those are sort of hallmarks of Netherlandish painting. And these paintings, again, were this is still Jan van Eyck. They were these were kind of all the rage, right? So the guys who are the merchants and diplomats who are present in Bruges and present in the Netherlands all wanted this stuff, as did all of the royal courts throughout Europe. So here you're looking at two more pictures by Van Eyck. Notice his point of view, which is kind of up high looking down. Notice also, again here, just the way, look at how the light kind of falls through these the window panes, and the way he's placed that figure. She's large on purpose, but the way she's kind of really in this very real atmosphere. There's a lot of space behind her before you get back here to these little pointy Gothic arches. It's a very particular type of atmosphere. This was so popular. This is an altarpiece that was painted for a Genovese patron. Again, tons of detail, your eye can hardly focus on it. And it's a tiny, tiny little piece. The middle panel is only 12 by 10 inches. And the two side panels actually close in like little doors. And it kind of becomes a little traveling altarpiece or a traveling small devotional image. And Antonello, the painter that we're going to look at, does a lot of that kind of thing, really small devotional images. What Jan van Eyck here has done too, that's very interesting and very typical of him and Netherlandish painting, is that when this image is closed, when the two side panels close in on top of the center panel, what's on the back of them is what you're seeing here on the right. And it's this very illusionistic painting. It looks just like two little shadow boxes with these tiny sort of ivory statues of the angel Gabriel and the Virgin Mary. This is the Annunciation, which is depicted on the back. So all this, very much attention to detail, illusionistic painting, and the use of oils is what's so particular to Netherlandish painting. Here in a deposition of Christ done by Petrus Christus, he is a student of Van Eyck, just as popular in Italy. His paintings were in Italy. This painting was actually in Italy, this deposition. Notice here the rhythmic composition, the way he's populated this scene with kind of stylized figures. They're all kind of very particular looking. And he's minutely rendered the landscape, things in the background, and in the foreground, really almost like a still life with the details. Here we're looking at the instruments of Christ's Passion, and there's this little, the little jar, Mary Magdalene's jar of unguent. Petrus Christus was also an amazing portraitist. And just to kind of compare with what was going on in Italy, Pisanello on the left was working at the same time as Petrus Christus, and he's doing very realistic looking as far as kind of this is a portrait, pure profile, and really shows you the actual profile of this is Leonello d'Este, his patron. Botticelli on the right, this much later, 1480, he's still working in tempera. He was also very concerned with line, so you've got this almost sculptural look of the profile portrait of Simona Vespucci. Well, Petrus Christus, who has studied under Van Eyck, is not doing portraits that way. He's doing portraits this way. He's got the figure turned, I'm talking about the portrait on the left. This figure kind of turned kind of 3/4 towards the viewer. He's looking straight at the viewer. He's used all of the power of his oil paints and all of his power of just scrutinizing minute detail in order to construct this very lifelike image that is almost arresting in the way kind of, the guy's looking straight at you. He's also kind of conveying the kind of psychological stance of this person. It's not just showing you that, his nose goes like this. He's kind of letting you know really kind of what's going on. And then on the right is this very kind of touching image of Christ, kind of the suffering Christ. And both of these images were produced in the Netherlands and very much influenced by humanist thinking in the Netherlands, which called for a new style of devotion. They referred to it as devotio moderno, modern devotion, in which the devoted was to imagine themselves really having a direct experience with, in this case, the suffering Christ. So the idea is to really bring you face to face with the suffering Christ. Small panel is just for you. And it's a way to kind of spur meditation and bring you right in with, really puts you on the kind of in the same sort of human level as Christ in a certain sense. So there was that. And then there was this whole idea as well of really focusing on sensory experience as opposed to abstract ideas. And so these are things that are sort of being bandied around, by the philosophers at court, and it's showing up in paintings as well. And it ends up being also similarly kind of working its way into the humanist courts of Italy at the same time. So these are the kinds of works of art that are coming out of Bruges that are so popular in Italy with merchants, with diplomats, and in courts throughout Europe, including the court at Naples. And here is the royal residence of Alfonso V, Aragon. He came into Naples in 1442 and decided to kind of renovate the castle. He wanted to make his court on par with Lorenzo de Medici in Florence. And he starts bringing in artists and works of art. And there's a lot of Flemish art coming in here, artists as well. And he has artists as members of court who he's asked basically to please kind of paint in the style of these Netherlandish paintings. So here is a man, Antonello, who turns out to be the master of Antonello da Messina. So Antonello is a very young man. He decides to study art, and he goes to the closest cultural center from Messina, which is Naples. Naples is a vibrant cultural capital. So it has the most going on of any city in southern Italy, and he ends up in the workshop of Antonello. So here's Antonello, who's this Neapolitan painter who's painting like Van Eyck, and he's painting like Christus, and he's a little bit not as autonomous as a painter as Antonello turns out to be, but he knows how to use oil paints, and he teaches Antonello how to do that. So this is how this is kind of the world that Antonello is coming into. So Antonello da Messina comes from Messina. His first stop really in the world of art, as far as we know, is in Naples, and he learns the art of painting in oils, and he sees all of this Netherlandish painting, and he starts doing things like this. So here's a crucifixion scene, which has kind of got that same point of view from above that Van Eyck used, but he's decided to do a much less populated panel, again, very small, tiny little devotional panel. He's trying to sort of convey the distress of the onlookers. Check these guys out here on the bottom right. Just the way that he has depicted grief in 3 different ways is very important. I really am just taken by that figure on the far right, the one who has their face in their hands, and the way those robes just kind of fall down and then crumple in that Netherlandish way at the bottom. But he's done this very beautiful thing in that, he's got this great detailed background, but it's Messina and the Strait of Messina. He likes to do that. He throws that in there. So you're looking at the Strait of Messina in the background. And he's also using the golden ratio. He does it again here. This is a later work of art, Crucifixion, still by Antonello. He's using a very similar style, but he's calmed it down even more. He's reduced the number of figures at the base of the cross to 2. He's using these just amazing limpid colors, which he's getting from his oil paints. He's got that just absolute serene background where the Straits of Messina kind of bleed out into those panes of the mountains of Calabria that then just kind of blur out into the horizon. And again, here's used the golden ratio, which, if you kind of do measurements and take out a compass, you'll end up with, this third being, I don't remember the mathematical computation, but he's doing the mathematical computation to render this sort of harmonious composition, which leads us to believe that he's really well educated and also super intelligent. And so he's kind of working those things into his pictures. Another early panel that he painted, and this has been through earthquake damage, unfortunately, and then also not very happily restored, but I'll show you some details where you can get more of an idea for it. So here is another of these annunciations where Gabriel has come down, the angel Gabriel has disturbed Mary as she's at her reading lectern to let her know that she is, about to bear the child of God. She is going to be the mother of Christ. We've kind of put it back together and it looks a little bit like that. So it might have looked something like that when it was a complete image before it had all of that paint loss. And what you're looking at here is this real kind of the beginning of Antonello's genius combination of the Netherlandish techniques and a couple little Netherlandish ideas, but put into a very rational, lucid Italian space. And the Italians were very careful about that, and we're going to sort of take a closer look at that as well. But Antonello was great at kind of combining those 2 things. We've got the depiction of man in a rational space, combined with these detailed elements that were really taken from Netherlandish painting and the use of oil paint. So you get things like this Hispano-Moresque vase with the cactus in it, this lovely gold thread brocade on the angel Gabriel, and then look at Mary's face, just absolute gorgeous modeling using basically geometric planes, tonalism, and just light. And he's made this complete serene figure of Mary who's kind of accepting her fate here. So Antonello proceeds. He also is very much well known as a portrait painter. We've looked at this in here before. So here we are, 1460s Italy. He's the only Italian who's doing that kind of 3/4 turn on the sitter, who's making that direct eye contact with us as the viewer. Again, the idea here is to really lend a psychological presence to the person who's being depicted and not just show what they looked like or even who they are. We're not even really sure who this guy is. We kind of lost track of that. He might be an unknown sailor. He might be the Bishop of Cefalù. Both of those things have been proposed. We're not really sure because he's not full of trappings, right? He's not wearing a certain outfit that tells you who he is. He's not showing you things that maybe would allude to his wealth or status or position. But what he's just looking straight at you is what he's doing. He's kind of inviting you to come in and take a look at his character. Antonello also did a large series of these images, devotional images, where the viewer really is put in direct, just face to face with an image of the suffering Christ. And the pathos here is just palpable, partly because of the realism and the way that Antonello has chosen to depict Christ. And then also look at how he's used this parapet device. And we're going to see that, we'll see that and some more works from his career. The parapet, in a way, my first thought is, oh, that separates us from the holy figure. The holy figure is on the other side of that parapet. But what it also does is it kind of illusionistically expands our space. I mean, it's like he's just on the other side of the window, right? I mean, it's literally like you're looking through the window and that's what's on the other side of the window. It's really kind of arresting. I find it really kind of even difficult to look at these images, which I think, again, is the point. So these are, again, very small paintings. This is about life size. The suffering Christ, the previous one just had the crown of thorns. Here, Christ has the crown of thorns. He has the rope, which is an object from the flagellation with the column in the background. And then again, just the technical mastery allowing Antonello to create this very lifelike image is just absolutely arresting. I mean, look, even at the tears of Christ, it makes it really almost just difficult to look at. But it fulfills that purpose of acting as a piece for meditation and prayer, and literally putting the viewer direct front and center with the suffering Christ. So paintings like this bring up kind of the main question that's always talked about with Antonello, which is, how did he learn how to do this? Did he go to Bruges? Did he go up there? So everybody wants to know, did he travel to Bruges? And he might have. And his possible travels are really much debated. So, he may have actually gone to the studio of Van Eyck to learn how to paint like this. We don't know that. Again, documents are super scarce. From Messina, he could have easily gotten on a boat and gone up there. There was certainly no problem. There was nothing kind of stopping him from doing that. His teacher, Col Antonio, actually wanted to go to Bruges, but his boss, the king, wouldn't let him go. He said, no, you're needed here in Naples. You're not leaving. So the teacher of Antonello thought that it would be a good idea to go to Bruges. So maybe he even, he had this exceptionally talented student. He might have suggested, you need to go up there. Like, I've done what I can for you. Now you go to Bruges. Or Antonello just managed to do this by, basically just being in contact with these great works of art and kind of assimilating parts of their style. I mean, very much is not sort of copying, but he's very much assimilating techniques. We do know that he made a trip some point in the 1450s. He made a trip. All we know is he came back. He came back in 1460, and he was carrying with him most of his personal goods and all of his family. So we figure he'd been away for a long time. We have no idea where he went. But after that period, his works of art kind of take on a new, almost sort of, are painted in light of what's going on in central and northern Italy. So we think perhaps he went through Italy, perhaps met some of the great artists who were working in Italy at the time, such as Pier della Francesca, who you can see here. He was a mathematician, one of the founders of the Italian Renaissance, worked very carefully in one-point perspective, and also applied the golden ratio, which you can see here in this painting of baptism from 1450. He may have come into contact with Mantegna, working in Padua and Mantua. This is the great San Zeno altarpiece from the 1450s, which is such a breakthrough for its unified space. All the figures are in one space, and they have this great kind of semicircle scooping back out into space. And he may have made it all the way to Venice to come into contact with the great Giovanni Bellini, who we're going to look at further. This is a kind of typical image of Giovanni Bellini, the three angels supporting the dead Christ, something that Antonello actually goes back to. Interestingly, he goes to Venice again, and by the time he gets there again, when Antonello goes to Venice on a documented trip, he's very well known. They knew he was coming. They were expecting him. They were waiting for him. He had a list of commissions as soon as he got there. So he seems to have been very much in contact with that world. And again, there's that link between Venice and Messina, so it makes sense. But we just don't really know, and we just have to guess. So looking at his works, though, we believe that he had contact with those artists and other artists of the Renaissance movement in central and northern Italy. So 1474, right at the beginning of this trip to Venice, Antonello paints this image of Saint Jerome in his studio. So Antonello's already got a very good reputation. He's sort of famous. This painting becomes immediately famous. It was done in Venice, and the Venetians were all over it. And it's actually written a lot about in Venetian documents. We know that they absolutely thought this was just a masterpiece. And what we're looking at, again, we're looking through, literally through a window. And so space has been sort of, punched out behind the picture plane so that we can look through the window into the studio of St. Jerome. And it's an interesting combination of elements because we're looking through a Catalan Gothic window, something that I've seen in Palermo and I'm sure existed in Catania. And Antonello says, okay, this is where I'm coming from. And we're going right in here. And he's placed this little St. Jerome in this wonderful kind of wooden study plopped right down inside of this great kind of really Gothic feeling, almost like the interior of a church. You can see some details here. Extreme detail, again, as he assimilated from the Netherlandish painters. He's rendered these Sicilian floor tiles. If any of y'all have been into a church in Sicily, they often have just these great hand-painted ceramic tiles, just, wacky colors all throughout the church. He's used this great, the birds on the windowsill, the partridge and the peacock that represent sacrifice and rebirth. And the peacock's about to have a little drink out of that great brass bowl. Look at how space kind of, the room kind of goes back to those great windows and that light that just kind of suffuses in. I don't know how he painted that, just amazing. And some of the details outside of the window, just, man existing in landscape. And he's kind of blobbed it on in a kind of more of an impressionist kind of a way. Van Eyck was likely to have had a magnifying glass and a tiny brush in order to actually get all the detail right. And Antonello was more about just kind of making, give your eye has the idea of what's going on out there. And he did the same thing when he plotted the perspective of the actual room itself. And if you can see, particularly here, the capitals, when he prepared his panel, he did some very light underdrawing, which is what he used to do, just very light, just some kind of ink strokes to just block out volumes. And he incised some lines to, again, block out volumes and kind of put in his perspective point. So he has a punta di fuga, a vanishing point back here. And you can see that the bases of the capitals go back to the vanishing point. And in theory, the capitals of the columns, would also go like this. And in fact, he originally designed them that way, and then he decided to just lower them. He thought they would actually, even if it's not mathematically perfect, to your eye, it looks perfect. And so he was very much interested in the overall effect of his work and not so much sort of plotting the geometry, which is what Piero della Francesca was doing. Piero della Francesca was, in fact, a mathematician. So he was following rigidly his mathematical formulas and sometimes coming up with things that were perfect, but maybe even a little sort of rigid and cold looking. And Antonello has avoided that completely by kind of ad-libbing as he is laying down the paint. Like he feels free to sort of do his own thing in order to make sure that the overall effect is what he wants. And that's what he's done here. So again, just really kind of made a stir in Venice, as did his portraits. Again, he started painting portraits as soon as he got there. I mean, they were lined up. People had kind of requested his services before he landed. This is 1474, 5 and 6 when he was in Venice. So again, he's really kind of revealing personalities in this really direct way. Again, the sitter's looking right at you, and you're encouraged more to kind of pay attention to his psychological presence more than you are to what he's holding in his hand. This is, again, an unknown sitter. Antonello's got the parapet. He's done his illusionistic little folded up note, which he's kind of stuck onto the parapet with 2 pieces of sealing wax. And this one says, Antonellus Messinus me pixit, 1474. Antonello da Messina painted me. We think this might be Giorgio Cordner. It's in the Cordner collection in Venice. But the idea, again, is to just sort of, look at the psychological stance of this guy as he's staring right back out at you. I mean, he looks like something to deal with. And then there's this guy who also looks like something to deal with, maybe in another way. We don't know who he is either. This was 1476. So these extremely lifelike portraits, which really don't even have the distraction of sort of, objects of status or wealth or something that would explain who these guys are. They're so effective in their naturalism. And again, that idea of psychological presence. that the Duke of Milan actually tried to get Antonello to come to court and be court painter, to be a court portraitist. This is while he was in Venice. He had another project going on. He was doing an altarpiece for this guy called Pietro Bon, who stood up to the Duke of Milan and said, no, he can't leave because he's working on a project for me. So no way, he has to finish this. And what he was doing was this altarpiece for a church called San Cassiano. And it's been dismembered and only parts of it remain, the central panel and two of the figures on the side of the Virgin and Child. We think it looked something like what you see here on the right. This was literally a breakthrough painting. It shows his interaction with the artist Giovanni Bellini, who was a super important Venetian artist who had a very influential family workshop. And who also had some interplay with Mantegna, for example. We've talked about that before. Here you can really see kind of how Antonello and Bellini were kind of working together. And Antonello has really, this is just sort of, the epitome of his sort of distilling the essence of Flemish painting. And he's combining it with really the avant-garde movement in Italian art. And he has sort of taken Bellini's idea of a composition. On the left, you see a lost painting by Bellini. This is an etching of it. He's kind of cleaned it up a little bit and made it even more clear. And then Bellini at this point, 1470s, was still painting in tempera. And Antonello did this entire altarpiece in oils, and it just made a large stir. First, really extensive use of oil paints in Italy on a larger scale. Here's some details. The Madonna is placed, again, there's that sort of palpable sort of atmosphere between her and the cloth, that gorgeous mauve cloth behind her. And that sort of very much Antonello-like, that sort of calm of the face of the Virgin. And then some details which he was able to do with his oil paints. Santa Lucia is offering what looks like a glass of water, which we're not really sure exactly what that is, but it looks like that. And it's just really outstanding. And then look at how he managed to kind of do a dull sheen here, kind of paint that dull sheen on these little metal balls. And then look at how he treated that kind of enamel, pearl, and ruby brooch. He's built up his tones from the lighter ground, layering his colors for that luminous effect. And then he goes back with a tiny little brush of thick lead white and just puts little dabs, little dots of highlight on there. Just makes those, look at how the pearls just pop out. So this created this huge splash. Giovanni Bellini then went and did a gorgeous altarpiece all in oils. This is San Giove, now in the Accademia in Venice. These are just two details of that. And you can kind of see, look at this, the face of the Virgin kind of, harkens back to that lovely kind of oval, very calm, serene Virgin of Antonello. So Antonello goes back to Venice in 1476, and he actually dies 3 years later. He died at age 49, which is quite young. Obviously, he left a will, though, which was sort of odd. So perhaps he knew that he must have had an illness or something, that maybe he knew the end of his life was coming. He goes back to Messina. He paints several more very, very moving devotional images, such as Dead Christ supported by an angel. Again, this is sort of taken from a Bellini type composition, and again, very much combining, all that he knows of, his sort of distillation of the concepts of Netherlandish painting, and then using that very kind of lucid, formal reproduction of space that's so common for Italian painting in this period. And then again, there's Messina in the background, which is so touching. And then his masterwork here, the Virgin Annunciate. This is, again, a relatively small panel. It's about that big. It's in Palermo. And here's the Virgin. She's been surprised by Angel Gabriel. She's at her lectern, and Gabriel's off screen. He's just done this, gorgeous work of piercing the picture plane. Her hand, the foreshortened hand of Mary, really just juts out into our space. The lectern juts out into our space. And he's really, by having Gabriel off site, we're very much involved here because we're sort of out here with the Gabriel. Gabriel seems to be right about here, right? We've looked at this painting before. Some of you might remember having seen this. Very much kind of putting you in the realm of the Virgin so that you can kind of contemplate her take on what's about to happen here. And then his painting is just exquisite. So she has that smile, which is just kind of on the verge of breaking, although she's just very much kind of calm, serene countenance. He's used tonalism, working with color. So he's modeled with color and light. He's not using hard lines at all. He's really managed to kind of join basically geometric planes together by just very gently modeling with tone and light. Just really amazing painting. He had some influence on artists to follow, people like Leonardo da Vinci, who really embraced oil painting. And when you model with just sort of color and light and shade, you end up with this kind of, in oil paintings, they call it sfumatura, which is what Leonardo is so much known for, that kind of blending of the oil paints, that you avoid there's just no line or hard break anywhere. And then in Venetian painting, following Bellini down to Giorgione and Tiziano, 1506, Laura on the left, and then 1538 on the right, Titian. So those are some of his kind of artistic legacy. But the main legacy really of Antonello is that he also brought the Renaissance to Southern Italy. He's kind of the guy who brought it there. But his main legacy is that he really brought together the Italian approach of spatial relationships and putting figures in space with that very detailed analysis of the natural world and the painting techniques, which were so important to Netherlandish painting. So he kind of brought that together. He was one of the links in one of the very great artists working in Italy during this period, which kind of really kind of solidified as the Renaissance. And here he was from Messina. People often talk about him as a European painter, not just an Italian painter, but a European painter because of his contacts really all throughout Europe. Just an amazing story. And it would be nice to have more documents, but we really are able to see so much from his works that it's nice that even so some of them are not in the best shape, it's nice to have so many of his works that we can actually kind of trace his development through. Back in Messina, so we are going to make 2 recipes tonight. We're going to make messinesi food. And I was going to make swordfish for y'all, but swordfish is not in season. It'll be in season this summer. So no swordfish, but I just want to show you how they fish swordfish down in Messina. I'm going to send y'all a swordfish recipe tomorrow, and we may do another swordfish recipe in the summer. But this is how they use a boat called a felucca. And these men stand up on these masts and they can spot the swordfish, which are just underwater, so they can kind of tell people where to go and fish for them. All right, so in lieu of swordfish, though, since there aren't any, we are going to make pasta ncasciata, cauliflower winter version, and we're going to make braciole messinesi. So these are all the ingredients that I'm about to use. These are both sort of like party food, but the ingredients are just literally humble, kind of stuff literally you probably have laying around for the most part in your kitchen. So here we go. Back in the kitchen, I'm going to put together the pasta, and then we'll make the braciole, which we're going to cook on the coals. So my helper back here, Domenico, is keeping the fire going for me. All right, so I'm going to put this pasta together. So again, the pasta is, turn the water up, a base of cauliflower, basically overcooked cauliflower. I'm going to put some, so this is the water the cauliflower cooked in. You can kind of see it's a little bit dingy looking. It's not exactly totally clear. I'm going to put some hot water over my raisins, which are part of this recipe. And then we're going to use saffron in here as well. So let me get that going too. I'm just going to use a pinch of saffron threads y'all can see I have some here. I'm just going to use kind of a pinch of saffron threads, and I'm going to let that soak in some of the hot cooking water as well before I mix it in. So this dish is really interesting layers of flavor. So I'm going to just let the saffron kind of do its thing and release some color and aroma. So this is a pasta that goes in the oven. So we're going to use long pasta, and I'm using bucatini. I'll show you what they look like. It's kind of like a spaghetti with a hole in the middle. You can kind of, I don't know if you can even see. Yeah, there's a little hole in there. You can kind of see it. So bucatini, you can use other pasta as well, but this is kind of the traditional one. So they're cooked in the water where I overcooked my cauliflower. I like to make vegetables the way we make vegetables in America, which is al dente. So they have a little bit of tooth to them, you know, like green beans. Whenever I make vegetables here, people, they tap me on the they tap me on the shoulder and they go, "Excuse me, your beans are undercooked." Like they think I don't know that. And so when I was talking to my Sicilian correspondent about this recipe, he's like, "You got to overcook the cauliflower." He's like, "Don't make it the way you make it. It's got to be overcooked." So the cauliflower has to be overcooked. And I'll show you why. Lorenzo, mi dici 5 minuti per favore?
Okay.
I've salted the cauliflower cooking water, and the cauliflower is literally going to get mashed. This is my just boiled cauliflower, boiled with water, but it's so soft, the salt water is so soft that it just literally with the back of a fork kind of mashes up into a cream. So I'm just going to do that while the pasta is cooking. And then the other components are onions, which I've actually gotten started. I use just red onion and cooked them down in olive oil. I'll show you in a second. I've already got them going. So again, the idea here is just these layers of flavor that really nothing actually stands out too terribly when you bite into this recipe. So the next step is to just melt some anchovies. And I have these beautiful, just beautiful pink anchovies that I'm going to melt down into the onions. So just a little bit of heat, the anchovies tend to completely break down, and they literally turn into just they just kind of add some umami richness to the recipe. You actually don't necessarily, it's not like you're taking a bite of an anchovy. Not that there's anything wrong with that, but I know a lot of people aren't thrilled to hear the word anchovy. So I'm just letting you know that it's a presence that you probably wouldn't guess it if you didn't know it was in here. And it really does add this umami without tasting at all fishy. So here's what these look like. I'll show you. So this is onions that have been dissolved in olive oil. I'm not getting, Zoom is taking the light. I can't figure out what Zoom is doing to the light here, with a little bit of anchovy. So while that finishes, I'm going to add the rest of my ingredients here. My the raisins with their water, the saffron, I'm just going to mix all this together. This needs to be slightly liquidy because it's going to go in the oven. And the pasta, we're going to take it out before it's all the way done. So the cauliflower mixture needs to be slightly liquidy with both cooking water and olive oil so that it will continue to cook the pasta. So you just kind of make this paste with strands of, you can always smell the perfume from the saffron together with the cauliflower, the raisins, and then here are the onions with anchovies. And then what gives its name to this dish is cheese, also known as ncasciata. And so it's pasta ncasciata, which means there's a lot of cheese. I'm going to use two different cheeses. I'm going to use cubes of caciocavallo. So this is a piece of caciocavallo cheese. I'm going to use cubes of this. And then I'm going to grate in a large amount of, va bene questo, Medici? My Sicilian connections back here giving me directions. Use cubes of caciocavallo so that when you're eating the warm pasta, you actually will get some sort of chunks of cheese. I'm going to grate pecorino. This is a super strong pecorino cheese and very much aged sheep milk cheese, very, very pungent. But you can use Parmesan if you want to. It's not very Sicilian, but you could. You can also use a pecorino romano because that's probably what you can find most of. You could also use some other pecorino cheese. I believe Manchego is an aged pecorino cheese. You could use that just to have kind of a different flavor.
Elaine, siamo a 5 minuti.
Grazie. I'm going to throw in a few pine nuts. If I can get this open. I cannot. Okay. I'm going to stir the cheeses in. I'm going to add the pasta. Grazie. And some pine nuts, just for fun. Just adds a little bit of texture and a little bit of nuttiness. Not too many.
You don't toast before?
I'm not toasting them before.
Okay.
Black pepper. You could toast them before. You would probably get a little more flavor out of them that way. Mixing everything together, I'm going to now take the pasta directly out of here. So the pasta is not cooked all the way. It's going to finish cooking in the oven.
It's important to say that you don't have fire under the pan with the cauliflower.
Oh yeah, thank you, Lorenzo. No, this is a spent burner. I just have put my bowl here for convenience. So I'm going to mix this through, and then I'm going to add two beaten eggs, and then I'm going to put it in a pan and into the oven. So that by the time it's done, it's really a kind of a solid, almost sort of, I don't know what to call it, casserole kind of a thing.
When you finish, you can show us when you finish.
Okay, I will.
Okay, we have a question. Was the pasta cooking with the flame on or just in the hot water from?
No, there's a flame under the pasta was boiling. It was in
5 minutes, but boiling.
Mm-hmm. The pasta boiled for 5 minutes.
There's a theory that we say that you can, when water starts boiling and you throw the pasta in there, you can stop the fire. You need the same time because the pasta need only the rehydration of this. So you can stop. The pasta doesn't need the continuing boiling water, but in Italy you have to leave the fire under. But normally we say that you can stop the fire, but it's better if you take the fire on.
Well, in this case, you probably could stop the fire because the pasta is going to, it doesn't even have to be cooked all the way. So it's going to cook some more in the oven. So I'm just going to stir some 2 beaten eggs around in here, and that's just going to help the whole thing set. And this is one of those recipes that they say it's better the next day. This is the kind of thing you can actually cook this. You can assemble it and cook it ahead of time and then just warm it up when you're ready to serve it.
And you use all the egg, not only the yolk.
I use the whole egg, yes. Okay, so I've mixed this through here. And I'm going to put this into a baking dish, kind of like a lasagna pan or something. And I have coated it with oil and breadcrumbs. So you know how you flour a pan? I did the same thing. I just used some breadcrumbs. Make some space.
We have another question.
Huh?
Suzanne asked, what liquid is in the pasta? Just the egg? I think you have the water that you have all with the cauliflower and with the saffron.
Saffron water, the water from the raisins, the olive oil from the onions, the water from the pasta, which I just lifted out and put in here. I didn't really, I on purpose did not drain it and shake the water off. So there was a little bit of water left on there. And then the eggs too.
It's very important to don't throw away the water of pasta.
Very important. And also remember, I cooked the cauliflower in that water. So the water is very flavorful. The pasta has absorbed some cauliflower flavor. And now it's about to absorb all of this other yummy umami flavor from the onions with the anchovies, the saffron. So I'm kind of sort of patting it down, but it's okay if some pieces stick up. And now this gets a coating of, let me see if I, breadcrumbs, just cheese, but hang on, cheese, more pecorino. This is gonna kind of make a crust on top. So we're gonna do pecorino. Olive oil, a little bit, just a touch more olive oil because it's so good. And I'm using Sagona Dispensa or Cordatina olive oil, which is really good with these flavors. And then a little bit of breadcrumbs.
This is a difference between this dish and lasagna. We don't use butter over there. We only use olive oil.
Right. No butter, no bechamel, olive oil, cheese. Okay, so this is going to go into the oven for about half an hour. And now I'm going to show y'all the braciole messinesi. Make some more room.
At what temperature you put the oven?
The oven is at 350. 350 for sort of 20, 25 minutes. 30 if you need it. Just enough to kind of set the whole thing and it gets nice and brown on top. I'm using, we're gonna make, these are little beef rolls. I'll show you the beef in a second. So here's the beef. I'm gonna use pieces of beef that are very thinly cut. This is a cut from kind of the back end, the kind of rump type cut. I'll send you the exact cut tomorrow when I send you the recipes. So we're going to use beef, vitellone. This is a piece of provola dolce. So it's not very spicy cheese. It's not very invasive. It's more of a sweet, sort of gentle flavor, and it's a little bit, it gets nice and melty. So you could actually use scamorza in here if you can't find provolone. The beef I'm going to turn this into kind of small pieces. I'm actually just going to cut it with kitchen scissors. And then it gets dredged in breadcrumbs that I'm about to flavor, rolled up, and you can cook it in the oven. You can cook it in a pan with a little bit of olive oil, or you can cook it over the coals, which is what we're going to do. So to flavor your breadcrumbs, I am using plain breadcrumbs, which I got from the bread baker. They're kind of funny because they're a little bit, and this is literally the baker's day old bread, which they just crumble up. And there's some, there's some chunks. Here's a little chunk, all different shapes, different sizes. So I'm going to flavor that up with some chopped parsley. And I'm going to grind up, make kind of a little paste out of a clove of garlic. And I'm going to do this by adding salt to the garlic. And so that'll be the salt in my breadcrumbs. It's January, so my garlic has that, can you see the anima, they call it, has a little kind of sprout. I'm going to remove that.
When you have a minute, we have a very interesting question by Patricia.
Okay, tell me.
Okay, is provola dolce different from provolone?
Yes.
Yes. Is it two kind of cheese, different kind of cheese?
Provolone is aged for a much longer time and is quite strong. And provola is a much younger cheese and is very mild. So you want a younger, mild cheese. You can use whatever you like in this recipe. The idea is to use more of a younger, mild cheese. But you can also, if you like the stronger flavor, that's totally fine. You can do that too. Also,
the origin of this kind of cheese, provolone is in the northern of Italy, for example. You find in the northern of Italy, not in the south.
I did not know that.
In the south, you
not the thing. That's new information. Thank you.
You're welcome.
So breadcrumbs, parsley, garlic, a little bit more of my yummy pecorino. You can also put Parmesan in here if you like. It's just a little bit of extra flavor. I'm going to add a little bit more salt and then just mix all that up. And I'm kind of running it through my fingers so that the garlic paste gets well distributed. Vuoi tirare fuori i... Okay.
Posso preparare?
Sì. So we're going to use coals from the fireplace. Domenico is going to pull the coals out and put the grate on top of it, and I'm just going to roll these up real quick. So the way to roll the meat up is, I need a little bit of olive oil on both sides. So coat them with olive oil on both sides. And I did that by putting olive oil on one side and then stacking them up. You don't have to be surgical about it, just more or less coat them. And then they run through the very flavorful breadcrumb mixture. So make sure they're coated on both sides with all of our nice cheese, garlic, parsley. And then I'm going to put just a couple of pieces of the provola, not provolone, in the middle. And I'm going to try to make a nice, neat little packet out of it. So I'm going to fold it down here and then fold the sides in and then roll it up. And then I'm gonna show you how I'm gonna put it on a skewer. And I think I'm gonna use some bay leaves between the, use some bay leaves between each one, but I'm not sure if my Italian people here, Lorenzo, tu che dici?
Scusa?
Ti metto un po' di alloro?
I don't like a lot of the flavor. I use alloro in only in roast meat, for example, or in the in cacciagione.
With, he uses it with game. Hang on, I'm gonna ask our other Italian person here who's helping me with the fire. Domenico, che dici se metto qualche foglie di alloro tra le braciole?
You don't believe me?
No, I think it's like an opinion. I think it's like an Americanata. È un Americanata or si può?
No, secondo me con la carne c'entra poco.
He says it makes no sense.
Okay.
Domenico says this doesn't make any sense. So you'll see how I'm kind of folding this. Yes, you can see.
You see?
I'm kind of folding this down and then folding the sides over and then just rolling it up.
We have another question, but this time is about garlic. You remove the green shot in the garlic.
Yeah, I did.
Yeah, but it's not for the flavor.
I remove. Some people say it's hard to digest. Some people say it gets bitter, and I just take it out because
it's more digestible, no?
Right.
Okay. And Chris asked me if I can repeat what I say about the provola dolce and provolone. Provolone is a cheese that comes from the northern of Italy in Valpadana, but and you find it in this part of Italy, and it's bigger than provola, and you can find sweet and spicy, piccante, spicy. It's good. Elaine, provolone dolce piccante, sweet, and the other
spicy.
Spicy. Okay. The same in the provola, but provola is you can find in the south part of Italy and is smaller than provolone. Okay.
Right, provolone literally means big provola. We're not using that. We're using regular provola. So I'm going to skewer these onto 2 skewers, which I've soaked in water so that it's burned over the fire. And if you do it on 1, you can't flip them, but if you do it on 2, you can flip them. So I'm going to just put each. And kind of go through the sides of each one of my roulades here. And I also noticed that it's helpful to not put them on here too tightly. They should be sort of vaguely touching, but not smashed on there, because if they're smashed, then they don't cook in the middle and you want them to cook all the way through. So they just need to go on the coals for basically kind of 4 minutes per side. Maybe 5 and 4. So here's what that looks like. Those are now going to go onto the coals. I'm going to get a little bit more breadcrumb mixture just because I can. Okay. E voi fare, ce l'hai un telefono? Per fare 4 minuti e poi. Lorenzo, mi dici dopo 4 minuti?
Sì, ok.
And I'm going to show y'all the yummy pasta ncasciata while we're waiting for our meat to cook.
Elaine, I answer a question. Suzanne, no bay leaf. We don't put bay leaf.
What?
Suzanne asked no bay.
They shut me down. I was gonna put a bay leaf in between each one of the little roulades, and all the Italians said no. Don't do that. So don't do that. However, when you do it with swordfish, you actually do put a bay leaf, and you even put a slice of citrus, lemon or orange, in between each roll up. And I think it'd be good on the meat too, but they shot me down. So I didn't.
You can make, but you have to shut off. You have to close your webcam, so me and Domenico doesn't see you.
Thanks. All right, I'm gonna try to cut through here so I can show you all the cross section of. So this is how the pasta, when it comes out of the oven, looks like that. That look good. And the parts of the pasta that are sticking up are supposed to get kind of hard and crispy, and then you have it's nice and toasty on top. I'll cut a piece for y'all.
You can put a piece in a dish. You can serve it.
That's what I'm doing.
You can send me a plate.
So Lorenzo's sorry he didn't come over tonight. Right?
She don't invite me anymore.
The hard pasta on the top does not want to cut. Hang on a second. Get the edges.
We have a reason because you don't invite me anymore. Don't say because of the bay leaves.
So here's the pasta coming out of the oven. Doesn't it look great? This is funny because most time, Italians will never cut pasta. You're supposed to long pasta. You're supposed to twirl it. Only this is okay. You're supposed to eat this with a fork and a knife because it's kind of like eating a lasagna, even though it's made out of long pasta. So that's the yummy pasta ncasciata. And again, it's just it's all these flavors just meld together, and it's a really, really interesting dish. And it's literally it's party food. This is not something you just make every night of the week. This is something you would eat for Sunday lunch or somebody's birthday or something. Quanti minuti siamo?
Manca ancora un minuto. What kind of wine you drink with pasta? This kind of pasta and this kind of meat?
I'll go ahead and turn it. I would say a light-bodied red. And of course, you can get something like that from the area of Messina. There's actually a DOC zone at Faro, and the grapes there's a red grape called Nocera and a red grape called, I think they still have like Nerello Cappuccio, which is one of the grapes from Etna. So they're very nice, light-bodied red with a good bit of acidity. And I would recommend that, or this would be really good with some nice kind of crispy white, and I'm thinking of stuff more like from Naples, like Greco di Tufo or Fiano or one of those kinds of white wines from that area around Naples, Campi Flegrei, Avellino, Irpino, Coda di Volpe, those kinds of white grapes.
Allora, sono 4 minuti, and you can, we have another question. Mm-hmm. You serve the pasta warm or room temperature?
The pasta is served warm. I don't know, si può mangiare anche a temperatura ambiente or meglio caldo?
No, tiepida.
Tepid, not super hot, but not necessarily.
Non calda.
No, warm. Warm is the answer. Not super hot, but warm. That's the Sicilian connection. So requires warm.
You can also make the morning breakfast with this kind of pasta, I think.
So yeah, Lorenzo on Sunday morning, that's what he eats for breakfast with the coffee, right?
With the wine, not coffee, with wine.
Why not? I guess. All right, I'm going to show you the meat rolls. They probably need another minute or two just so that they get hot all the way through, but I'll show you how they look the outside. They get nice and toasty. And then I'll say goodbye. So here's how the meat rolls turn out. They get kind of nice and crispy on the outside. And again, if you have 2 skewers, you can actually turn them. If you had 1 skewer only, they just spin. I've tried that, don't do it. So here they are, and I'm going to stick them back on the fire just so they, the meat is super thin. I think y'all saw that. It was cut to just like, a 1/4 of an inch, not even. So it doesn't take very long at all to cook. You just want the cheese to kind of get melting. And there we go. So first course, pasta in forno. Second course, braciole. Thanks, y'all. Thanks for being here. Do you have any more questions?
If someone has some question, you can turn on your microphone.
I'll have some good questions. We might have gotten everybody. Thanks. Well, y'all, thanks so much for being here. It was good to see y'all. I will send recipes tomorrow. And if y'all have any questions in the meantime, let me know and we'll be in touch. Thanks.
And you can find also this video very fast on your website.
And you can see all of our videos. Actually, if y'all are new here today, if you want to see any of our back programs, they're on our YouTube channel. You can go on my website, you can find a link. And I'll put the link on our recipes tomorrow. Very good to see y'all. We will be in touch tomorrow with recipes. Bye.